All right, so today we're diving deep into Lamentations,
Specifically chapters 1 through 5.
which you've generously shared with us.
Yeah.
And, I have to admit, when I first heard Lamentations, I thought, okay, ancient poetry, mourning, destruction.
It does sound a bit heavy, doesn't it?
Yeah, a little bit, right?
But there's so much more to it.
But you're saying there's more.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, convince me.
Well, Lamentations captures this raw, visceral emotion
Okay.
of people who've experienced unimaginable loss.
Mm.
I mean, their cities in ruins, their temples destroyed.
It's like their whole world has been shattered.
Exactly. Their lives are completely upended.
Okay, so where do we even begin with this?
Chapter 1 starts with this incredibly powerful image
Okay.
of Jerusalem as a desolate widow weeping bitterly.
No, that's not just sad. That's like
It's gut-wrenching.
a punch to the gut. Yeah.
It is. And right away you see
Okay.
how Jeremiah personifies the city.
Hmm.
He gives a voice to its suffering.
It's like the city itself is a character.
Exactly. And he even describes the roads to Zion mourning.
The rows are mourning.
Yeah, because no one's coming to the religious festivals anymore.
Wow. So it's like their whole way of life.
Their whole life has been disrupted.
Yeah, everything's been turned upside down.
Right. And then there's this brutal honesty
Okay.
about the cause of their suffering.
Hmm.
Jeremiah doesn't shy away from the people's sins against God.
So he's saying they're partly to blame?
He acknowledges their role, yeah,
Okay.
but he also points to the cruelty of the Babylonians.
Right. So it's this complex mix
It's not a simple answer
of human responsibility and these larger questions.
about why suffering exists.
Right. So that tension is there right from the start.
And it continues throughout the whole book.
So chapter 2, it feels almost like a shift in perspective.
In what way?
The tone becomes more descriptive, like we're getting an eyewitness account.
Almost like a news report.
Yeah, exactly. Like we're right there in the middle of the siege. And the imagery, it's so vivid, almost cinematic.
Jeremiah doesn't hold back.
No, he describes God covering the city with this cloud of anger.
Like a physical manifestation of God's wrath.
Yeah, and he's swallowing up their homes, cutting off their strength.
Like a raging fire.
Exactly. It's terrifying.
It paints a picture of just overwhelming force.
And there's this one detail that just sticks with you.
What's that?
It's when he talks about the children, the young children, begging for food and water, dying in the streets.
It's hard to even read.
It's heartbreaking, honestly.
It's where the questioning of God intensifies. Because it's one thing to grapple with your own suffering.
But the suffering of innocent children.
It raises the most difficult question.
About God's role in all of this.
It's almost too much to bear.
So then, chapter 3,
Okay.
we move from this public devastation
To a more personal lament.
to something more intimate, right?
Yeah, most likely from Jeremiah himself.
It's raw,
Like he's pouring out his heart.
he's detailing the physical and emotional torment he's enduring.
It's like we're seeing the psychological impact.
Yeah, the toll it takes on the human spirit.
He feels trapped, lost in despair.
What happened?
There's this shift, like a flicker of light.
In the middle of the chapter.
Right. He remembers God's mercy, his faithfulness.
And you can sense a glimmer of hope breaking through.
It's subtle, but it's there.
It is, like a small ember in the darkness.
And I think of that line. It is because of the Lord's loving kindnesses that we are not consumed, because his mercies don't fail. They are new every morning.
That's a powerful line.
It really is.
It doesn't erase the pain
But it speaks to a deeper truth.
about God's presence, even in suffering,
It's a reminder that hope can exist.
even in the most devastating circumstances,
It's something to hold on to.
even when everything feels lost.
And then we come to chapter 4,
Okay.
and the focus shifts back to Jerusalem.
But with a different emphasis
Right. This time it's about the contrast.
between its former glory and its current state. It's like looking at a before and after photo.
Where the after is a wasteland.
Exactly. And Jeremiah uses this incredibly poignant image.
What's that?
He compares the city's sons to broken clay pots.
Oh, wow.
They were once valued like fine gold.
And now they're just shattered
It
fragments.
just hits you in the chest, this sense of shattered potential.
It speaks to the fragility of human achievement.
Even Jerusalem, the city of God.
Can be reduced to rubble.
It's a harsh reality.
It forces you to confront the fleeting nature of earthly glory.
And then there's the graphic depiction of the famine.
Oh, yes.
People are driven to desperate acts.
Even mothers resorting to cannibalism.
It's horrifying.
It paints a picture of utter devastation.
And here's where the text pushes us to think about
Divine justice.
Right, because Jeremiah points out that Jerusalem's punishment
Exceeds even that of Sodom.
Sodom, the city known for its wickedness.
It raises questions about the nature of God's judgment.
Why would he allow this level of suffering?
What does it say about his mercy?
There aren't easy answers.
No. But the text doesn't shy away from the complexity.
And then finally, chapter 5. It feels like we're transitioning to a communal lament
A collective cry to God.
from the people of Jerusalem.
They acknowledge their failures,
Their sinfulness
but they plead for God to remember them.
to intervene.
There's a raw vulnerability in their words.
They lay bare their suffering, the orphans, the widows.
The people being hunted for food.
It's a heart-wrenching plea for mercy.
And the chapter ends on a note of uncertainty.
Their cry hangs in the air, unanswered.
We're left to wonder
If there's any hope of redemption.
if faith can endure in the face of such loss.
It's unsettling, but it makes you think.
It doesn't offer a simple resolution
It invites us to sit with the questions
with the pain and uncertainty.
alongside the people of Jerusalem.
It's a powerful ending to a powerful book.
It really is, and it makes you realize that sometimes the questions are more important than the answers.
That's a profound thought.
It's not about finding easy solution
It's about wrestling with the hard truths.
and allowing ourselves to feel the full weight of the emotion
To grieve, to question, to hope.
and to do it all in community.
Because we're not meant to walk this path alone. We were talking about how the book itself is like a lament.
Yeah, like it mirrors the emotional journey of the people.
And it doesn't shy away from the tough stuff.
It really doesn't. And we talked about the imagery,
Yeah.
but I want to dig deeper into how that imagery works.
Okay, what do you have in mind?
Well, like that line about Jerusalem's sons being like broken clay pots. What makes that metaphor so effective?
It speaks to this idea of shattered potential.
Okay.
These young men, once the pride of the city,
Right.
now they're just broken, useless.
Like this discarded pottery.
Exactly. It captures the sense of a future lost.
A future that's been ripped away.
Yeah. And it's heartbreaking because
Mm.
we associate clay pots with everyday life.
Something ordinary, replaceable.
But here, it takes on a whole new meaning.
It's like the ordinary becomes precious.
And then we see the devastation of its destruction.
And there's this contrast throughout the book between Jerusalem's former glory and its desolation.
Right, that juxtaposition of past and present,
It's like a before and after photo.
where the after is just emptiness.
It makes the pain so much more palpable.
And I think that's intentional.
I think so.
The purpose of lament isn't to wallow,
But to confront the loss head on,
to acknowledge the full weight of it.
and that's where healing can begin.
Right.
So we've talked about the emotional power, but there's also this theological layer
Of course, this book grapples with big questions.
about God, suffering, justice,
And one of the most challenging aspects
is how God is portrayed.
right, he's not just an observer.
He's actively involved in the suffering,
He brings judgment and destruction,
which is hard to grasp.
especially if you see God as purely loving.
Yeah. So how do we make sense of that?
Well, it's important to remember
Mm.
the ancient Israelites had a different view of God.
Than we do today.
They saw him as both loving and wrathful.
So capable of both mercy and judgment.
Exactly.
It's a more complex understanding.
It reflects their worldview, but it also speaks to a deeper human struggle,
With the problem of evil.
trying to understand how a good God can allow suffering.
And Lamentations doesn't shy away from that question.
It leans into it, explores it from many angles.
And it doesn't offer easy answers.
No simple solution.
It gives us a framework to wrestle with it.
To honestly engage with God, even in our anger.
You mentioned earlier that Lamentations was meant to be read aloud.
Yes, chanted even.
I wonder how that communal aspect shaped their understanding.
It's crucial to consider. Imagine hearing these words spoken aloud in a group. It becomes a shared experience.
Like group therapy almost. A way to process trauma together.
And find solace in shared pain.
Exactly. It reinforces that faith isn't private.
It's lived out in community.
We need each other to grieve, to question, to heal.
That makes me think about how we often isolate ourselves in pain. But maybe there's value in embracing community.
In being vulnerable with each other.
Absolutely. And Lamentations shows us it's okay to bring those raw emotions to God.
The anger, the doubt.
It's about honesty, not pretending.
Which is so counter to our culture today.
Right. We're supposed to be positive all the time.
But Lamentations says it's okay to not be okay.
To acknowledge the darkness.
And God can handle our honesty.
He's not afraid of our questions.
So we've talked about the emotional power, the theology.
And the communal aspect of lament.
But there's one more element.
What's that?
Hope. Because even in the midst of despair,
there are glimmers of hope.
Like that line about God's mercies being new every morning.
Yes, that pivotal verse.
What do you think it's trying to tell us?
It's a reminder that even when we feel abandoned,
God's love endures.
That's a message of hope for anyone facing darkness.
And that hope isn't about ignoring the pain.
Right, it's about clinging to belief.
That even in the brokenness, God is working.
That he can bring beauty from ashes.
Make all things new.
And that's a powerful message to carry with us.
Especially in the face of tragedy.
Absolutely. Lamentations doesn't deny suffering.
But it points us toward redemption.
Restoration.
It reminds us that even when we can't see a way forward, it's like a beacon in the darkness.
A reminder that there's still reason to believe.
And sometimes that belief is all we have. So we've covered so much ground with Lamentations.
It's such a rich and complex book.
It really is. And, you shared some personal notes. And there's this one passage you highlighted.
Which one is that?
In chapter 3, verse 22.
Oh, yes.
It says, "It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not."
It's a powerful verse.
And you wrote in the margin, "This feels like a lifeline."
It does, doesn't it?
Can you tell us why that resonated so deeply with you?
It struck me because it acknowledges the reality. We are not consumed.
Right.
It doesn't say we aren't hurting or struggling.
It acknowledges the pain.
Yeah, we're in a difficult place, but we're still here.
And that's because of God's mercy.
It's not sugarcoating it, but it offers strength within the pain.
Exactly. And,
Right.
Lamentations isn't just about expressing grief.
Okay.
It's about lamenting well.
Lamenting well. What do you mean by that?
It involves honesty about our pain,
Right.
but also remembering God's faithfulness. Holding on to the truth that even when we feel abandoned,
his love remains.
his compassion hasn't disappeared.
It makes me think about what you said earlier, about lament being an act of faith.
It is, because even in questioning, in anger and doubt,
We're acknowledging God's presence.
we're still engaging with him.
Even if it's through tears and clenched teeth.
It's like saying, "God, I'm hurting, I don't understand."
That I'm still here, I'm still talking to you.
Exactly. And that turning toward God,
Even then,
that's where hope begins to flicker.
it's not denial, but a refusal to be consumed.
Right.
So, to apply this to our own lives,
We need to hold on to those reminders of God's faithfulness.
even when things feel hopeless.
Not just in our heads, but expressing them.
Yeah, Lamentations doesn't shy away from raw emotion.
But it also weaves in praise and trust.
It's like a tapestry.
Of grief and hope woven together.
Exactly, and that's what makes it so powerful.
We're not meant to suppress our grief.
Or pretend everything's fine.
But we're also not meant to drown in despair.
It's about finding that balance,
Of lament and praise.
a rhythm of both.
And what's really stood out to me
What's that?
is the power of community in Lamentations.
It's not a solitary experience.
We're meant to lament together.
Share our burdens, offer comfort.
And it's not just about feeling sorry.
It's about reminding each other of truth.
Speaking hope into each other's lives.
We need those voices, especially in despair.
And sometimes we're called to be those voices.
It's a two-way street
It makes you think about how we can create spaces
where lament is welcome.
where it's okay to not be okay,
Spaces for honesty without judgment.
where we can weep together but also offer hope.
That's a powerful challenge to carry with us.
It is to lament well, to hold on to hope.
And to do it together.
Because even in the ruins, there's beauty.
And a God who weeps with us whispers comfort.
It's been profound exploring Lamentations with you.
It's been my pleasure.
Hopefully our listeners feel equipped to engage with this book
In a new way.
and find solace and strength in its message.
Of lament and hope.
That's what it's all about.